We're getting back on track here with Catherine and Emily, but as you know, we won't stay there for long because this is the Going Off Track podcast.
Hello, and welcome back to the Going Off Track podcast. I'm Catherine, that's Emily, and there have been great season openers in Formula One history, but that was a bananas Formula One season opener in the history of the sport. This is the season opener
we've been waiting a year for. We've been waiting for 2025 season forever, and we got it, and I'm so glad it wasn't a flop. I feel like it was either going to go one of two ways. It wasn't going to be like, oh, some action, but a little, blah. It was either going to be the world's most boring race and like all the rookies survived, or it was going to be absolute carnage and madness and mayhem, and that's what we got, and I'm so happy we did.
Yeah, that was you're not going to get 24 of those types of race in a season.
No. But I don't want 24 of them either.
That was very stressful for us the entire time watching, but that is something that you want a lot of, that type of intrigue and that type of strategy, because we had crashes, we had a guy who didn't start, we had rain and then dry period and then rain period, and the decision making during that second rain period toward the end of the race
was really huge.
Was huge for not just the overall scope of the race in general, but to give us something other than a race that started wet, but then really was just drying the entire time, and really gave us something to look forward to in the second half of that race. And so many questions, and teams who gambled and got it right, and teams that gambled who got it very, very wrong.
Well, I think it's just for me, it was very telling to see if teams have changed from prior years, and they just haven't.
Nope.
But it's also a huge eye-opener that strategy makes up, I would say, 80% of this whole thing. The setup and decisions when to pit, what tires to put on, that makes up such a big portion of it. And then I think a lot of it's luck, and then it's also driver talent. But speaking of luck, Carlos Sainz, lap 1, his car just goes
freaked out on him
and freaks out on him, and all of a sudden he's out. He's DNF. He did literally nothing wrong. And then also luck. Look at the corner that Norris and Piastri both went over on, and Piastri just got the unlucky turn and exit, and he ends up in the grass. Luck is, maybe that's all driver skill, but it looked identical, and I don't know. I would say luck, especially when it comes to rain. But this was really exciting.
I think it's a combination of luck and the fact that Australia as a track hates Australian drivers.
It really does. It really does.
There has never been an Australian driver on the podium.
Not even Oscar, winning, just on the podium.
On the podium. Oscar was on the verge, and Melbourne, as an institution, saw that and said, can't have that. Gotta make, ruin Oscar's day, which was very, very unfortunate and very disappointing. But it was that's the kind, this is the racing that we knew we were going to get. We knew we were going to have a very close battle between the top, 3-4 cars, constructors. And this is what we've been waiting for since Red Bull went on a tear in 2023 and won every race except for Singapore. This is what we've been waiting for.
And I think this, just in general, my favorite seasons are the last year of regulations, because you've had several years to figure it out. You keep improving. And so the last year of regulation, I think, has always been my favorite. It's when we always have the tightest race. We have the most winners. So I'm very excited to see how this season shakes up. Yeah, I think it was a lot closer than a lot of people thought it would be. And I think we had a lot of cars in the mix that people did not think would be in the mix, which this season's going to be so good. I'm so excited.
Yeah. Now, I also do think, not to take away from any of what you just said, but the weather conditions definitely contributed to a lot of the unexpected results that we got, because those McLarens have some of the best tire handling. They have the tire handling and the tire performance that the Red Bulls did in 2023.
Agreed.
And had there not been that crossover period and that second rainstorm and those crashes midway through the race, both McLarens would have been completely gone, and Max would have been just languishing in the middle of no man's land in P3 where he was for the first half of that race.
Okay, yes, that's fair. I think I meant in general, everyone was like, the constructors are closer than, like, McLaren, yes, they
definitely
took off and went, but the constructors are a lot closer than, like, in 2023, when it was just, like, Red Bull and then, like...
everyone else.
No, we're still waiting. And then everyone else. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, Lando at one point had a 13-second lead, whatever, but... like with pit stops and stuff, that comes back, and it was very early on in the race still, so maybe he would have extended. We don't know. Lots of what ifs with the weather, but we saw lots of constructors. It wasn't as like Red Bull, Mercedes, Ferrari, like we've always had. You know what I mean? Like it was a mixed bag, which I really like.
So let's start talking about the constructors, and then we'll get to the podium.
Perfect.
But the constructors going into this race, I didn't expect the constructor standings, which I know it's race one, it's early, it doesn't matter, but it's still notable. McLaren and Mercedes are currently tied for the lead. McLaren, with the aggregate finish, is ahead of them with the win, but they have 27 points each, which Mercedes got 2 points back because Kimi Antonelli's penalty was reversed. Mercedes got that overturned overnight. Yeah. They challenged it, and then Red Bull still chilling in P3, but P4 is Williams, who scored 10 points in one race, whereas they scored 17 points in all of 2024.
Yeah, and that, I mean, I think my, not disappointment, but like my heartbreak goes to Williams because it was a fluke accident with the car. I feel like if Carlos didn't have that, he would have finished pretty high. I mean, Albon finished, it was
P4, P5.
Went down to P5, but so that's a huge finish for Williams. And say we got like a P5, P6 finish. Together, that's more than they had all season last year. And
yeah,
that just sets them up for such a good trajectory. And even though he didn't, I mean, they're still way ahead of pace for what they've done in the last few seasons. I really think Williams is going to be the contender for like, I said this when we said our predictions. They're going to be like a 4, 5, 6. I really believe that. I don't think it's going to be like hoping for 6, 7. I think it's going to be hoping for like 5, 6.
Yeah, I think even that 4. The Williams really exceeded even their own expectations. I don't think anybody, including their own camp, thought that they would be this pacey. And remember, qualifying was in the dry and was in quote unquote normal conditions, and I think this was the first time they had a double they qualified both of their drivers in the top 10 in like 20 years. Yeah. So it's been a minute, and this is the exact trajectory that Williams has wanted to be on for years, and this is exactly why James Vowles brought Carlos onto the team.
And I want to kind of talk about something interesting here. So we've all by now seen the interviews with JV talking about how integral Carlos's feedback was and his, thoughts around strategy, when to change the tires, if the drivers can stay on, conditions, everything like that. And they listened to him.
Mm-hmm.
What a concept. I feel like you have team principals who are team principals, and you have team principals who are drivers' team principals. And I think JV really takes into consideration and processes what Albon and Sainz also tell him about strategy or feedback from the car, improvements, whatever. I really think he listens to that, maybe more so than other people who are like, oh, well, we're this team and we know what's best because we are this team. Ferrari.
Ferrari is down in P7 right now.
Exactly. And I also feel like it was so telling when Lewis kept saying, leave me alone. I know where the button is. When I'm there, I'll do it. And they're like, well, just this is what you need to
try it.
Right. And I it's one race in. I know it's way too early, but I feel like that relationship is just going to go sour real quick. And I think James is really building a program and building a team. And we've said this ad nauseum, but it really, that one interview solidified all of my thoughts about James of he's really here to build a team, to take feedback from the drivers, to all grow together. That's why Alex is still there. That's why they gave, Logan Sargent such a long shot when probably he didn't deserve a second year. But he really wants to build a team around drivers and use them and build it together. And I think that really intrigued Carlos, and that's why he's there. And I think if anything, this is really encouraging Carlos to perform. You know what I mean? Like, he's like, wow, they listened to me. Like, this is amazing. What is this like? I don't know. So
Yeah.
I just thought that was interesting.
And this is them listening to him while he's giving advice for his teammate, because he's not even in the car right now. And
Exactly.
He was advising them on the switch back to inters in the latter half of the race and saying, like, here's what we should do. Also, watch this with Ferrari. They're going to totally screw themselves.
Love
because
that.
there was a point where Lewis and Charles were running 1-2 at the top of the field when everyone was going through all that chaos after the McLarens had their little excursion into being lawnmowers. And Ferrari gambled but lost, and some of it you can't really fault them for, but some of it you kind of can.
Ferrari'd.
Lewis will have to learn. This is a brand new relationship with a brand new race engineer in Ricky, who used to be Carlos's race engineer. So, like, there's a lot to do. So we knew it wasn't going to be seamless. And, Anthony Hamilton talked on the grid walk about this is feeling like the first day of school, and it really is. But Ferrari's got some work to do, or Lewis is going to be a real unhappy man.
Yeah. I also think it's really cool that Carlos was still so engaged into the race and not just like standing by his girlfriend in the pit. Like he was running from pit wall back in, like talking strategy, super engaged, which just again shows he's really there to help build the team. And I think that's the thing that's different than Ferrari is they already have that establishment, which is where it's like, Lewis, welcome to our establishment. You will fit here. Where JV is like, hey, we're Williams. We're rebuilding. We were once great. We want to be there again. How can you help us get there? Like, what do you see in our house that needs fixing? Let's fix it together. And I think it's two completely different strategies. And I think it'll be really interesting to see how those two teams kind of shake out this year with all the movement. So
yeah, especially in the long term, and especially there has been some news this week about how Carlos Sainz Sr. wasn't really thrilled that Junior Carlos decided to go with Williams over Stake, which will become Audi. Because Senior has a long-standing history with Audi in rally car, and Senior is a phenom, not even just considering his age, just in general in rallying.
He's like one of the best rally drivers to ever walk this planet Earth.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't have the greatest year in Dakar this year, but the man is phenomenal. So I think that it's interesting, and I think that this is also, Carlos Sainz has a little bit to prove with his decision with Williams, and I think there were a lot of questions going into the season and even going into the postseason test last year, where it's like, did he really make the right call? But I think that the trajectory that we're on right now is very positive and a completely different Williams that we saw a year ago in Bahrain.
I agree. Oh, I'm so excited for them.
I know.
Okay, what other constructors do we want to talk about? I kind of want to talk about McLaren.
Yes.
I mean, we have to at some point, but I just think it's like, I know they look like they're going to do well this season. Very fast car. I think it's going to be a struggle for them because they don't have a number one driver, and if they're always at the front, Piastri is not always going to be happy just sitting there. But I think it was really interesting how they're like, no, hold position, hold position, hold position. And then, like, once Lando got a big lead because, like, something happened, they're like, oh, well, okay, maybe now you can race. It's like,
so I wanted to talk about that,
don't like that because it's like they have to give Lando the lead and then tell Oscar he can start racing because they know Oscar can beat Lando and they don't want him to. Like, that is my tinfoil hat theory, is that Oscar's the better driver. They favor Lando, and it's going to be a disaster and a mess this season. And they're both going to be frustrated. They're both going to be unhappy. And then Zach's going to be mad and talk about it. We don't need more interviews from Zach. But it really reminds me of, not to like name drop Ferrari again, but it reminds me a lot of Charles and Carlos. Carlos was driving a lot better than Charles for a majority of last season, and they would still like shit on him and give Charles whatever he wanted because he's Charles.
So I do have some thoughts on that. And I obviously I don't disagree with you, but I do think that I don't want to say that it was misconstrued during the race, and because it feels gross because it was when Oscar was the closest up to Lando. But the other thing to take into consideration, which is why they asked them not to fight at that point, was they were going through back markers. That was when they started overtaking the Haas's, and they didn't want to take each other out and hand Max the win while they were trying to overtake a pair of very slow Haas's, including Ollie Behrman, who made some very questionable decisions considering he did manage to finish the race. So that's why they were like, don't overtake right now. And then it got to the point where instead of being half a second behind, he was 2 seconds behind Lando. So it looked really icky. It feels really icky, and I don't like it, but I understand why McLaren asked them to do that. And at the same time, in dry conditions, they need to let them race. And if I hear the words Papaya rules coming out before mid-season, I'm going to be annoyed.
Yeah, I think that's the trade-off, right? When you sign two really, really strong drivers and you don't have
forever.
Right, exactly. Like this isn't a problem that's just going to go away. So they need to figure it out, and they need to figure it out fast. And I understand they're like, oh, well, we don't make those decisions and blah, blah, blah. But like, you do it. Don't be weird about it.
Yeah. Also, quick tangent, and we talked about this in our DMs, but in all of the McLaren coverage and Drive to Survive, there was one bit that stood out that we didn't mention in our reaction, which was Zach Brown's friend, Anze Kopitar, who, by the way, just so happens to be a star for the LA Kings NHL hockey team. And the fact that Drive to Survive was just like, this is Zach Brown's random friend.
They demoted him to friend of
Zach Brown, who was just some guy who managed to win Wheel of Fortune as a teenager and now happens to be the CEO of one of the top motorsport teams in the planet. But that's Anze Kopitar.
Yeah. It's also wild how like Zach Brown's whole entire life trajectory changed because of Wheel of Fortune.
Yeah.
Like, I just will never not think that's funny.
Yeah.
Okay. Also, Mercedes. So, again, this is what's so annoying. I had no idea where George was the entire race. Could not give a shit.
I know.
I was watching Kimi just because, like, you want to. You're cheering for him. He's one of the
he was
two
doing
rookies
the best
that survived. He was passing people, like, amazingly, right? Ended up in P4, which is amazing for a rookie, especially in these conditions when 4 of them, DNF'd, or 3, depending on where you put Liam Lawson.
He's a rookie now.
He's shown his rookie cards. But then all of a sudden it's like, oh, George is on the podium. And I'm like, how? No, why? What is going on? Like, maybe he drove a great race. I couldn't tell you. We did not talk about him at all, and then all of a sudden he's on the podium. And this is what bothers me, and I know it bothers you, is that Mercedes just gets these sneaky points, and then all of a sudden they're leading the championship. I know it's the first race. However,
George was really in, like, extreme no man's land, and Max was there for a while. It's just Max is a little bit more noticeable because he had overtaken Oscar early, in the start, and the start was funny because everybody just inched off the line. I
was like,
when they finally got to the formation,
really going slow.
It was so slow, and that's the thing, like, this Australia track itself is so difficult in the wet. It is not like, there are some tracks, say Sao Paulo, where it's challenging to drive in the wets, but you can do it. This was like they were on ice skates, and ice skates that didn't have anything that could with no brakes.
Well, they were saying on the telecast that it looks like it's a greased track. It really did. Fully. It looked. I mean, because it's not a permanent track, right?
Yeah, it's semi-permanent. It's part street. It's
semi-permanent. And so these streets aren't in racing conditions all year long. And so they only have so much control over that. So when you add rain to, oiled and greased, civilian streets, however you want to call them, you're going to have some issues. It's going to be slippery.
Yeah, you have that issue in Monaco. If it rains in Vegas, you'll have that same issue in Vegas there. At least now Vegas has managed
one more thing with Vegas
to bolt down the manholes. But yeah, it's the track made it very, very difficult. It's also been reprofiled from last year, which was most notable in that one gravel trap that everybody kept driving through and spraying gravel all over the track during the practice sessions. That I don't know if that was the best place for that little bit of reprofiling. Like, I understand, track limits and wanting to not deal with track limits, and gravel's the best way to do it. But I still think that they need to fix that portion of that turn a little bit, because everyone was getting bitten by it. And when
that's
everyone's
the thing. If it's
getting
like
bitten,
one or
it's
two
a problem.
people, yeah, if it's one or two, it's like they need to do better. But every single person hit it.
Yeah, everyone. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, before we leave Mercedes, I do want to come back to, I feel weird calling him Kimi Antonelli now, because in the broadcast they never called him Kimi. They called him Andrea Kimi Antonelli.
Yes.
Which I understand that's his full name, but we don't call Carlos his 27 names. We just say Carlos Sainz or Sainz. But I don't want to toot my horn too early, but I did say he was going to be, it was going to be a really good season for him. He was going to show up and show out. And one, he plays P4, which is insane. And two, he's the only one of two rookies to finish. One of them was Ollie Behrman. And congrats to him on finishing. But at the same time, he rode in P20, which then turned into P15, P14, whatever, the entire way. I'm pretty sure he was significantly slower than everybody else, and his one job was to not crash, which he succeeded
not
at.
Crash in the race.
He crashed twice in the weekend, so I'm pretty sure they were like, we will take your arm if you crash again. So
please don't crash.
Don't do it. We can't afford it.
They just resized their pit to the full size pit wall. They're we're gonna have to go back to that tiny thing, aren't we?
Yeah, but good for him. But yeah, for Kimi to drive that way, finish P4 as a rookie,
and not only that, but he spun. So he had a ton of overtakes early, spun, then had to take a ton more overtakes again. He even pointed out early on, after Jack Doohan crashed on the first lap, his race engineer, who was now Bono, was like, hey, Jack did this and that's why he crashed. And Kimi was like, yeah, I almost did that too. It's because those white lines are dangerous, and that's what bit most people, except Carlos's car freaking out at him, which was just Carlos's car freaking out. But yeah, Kimi had the most overtakes in the race. He qualified, don't forget, he qualified terribly. He was in P16 and finished P4.
And I think, okay, so one, yes, that's making up a lot of places, but I think this is more where he should have been. Remember, he broke and damaged the car in qualifying, which is why he qualified in P16. I think if he didn't have that issue, he would have made it into Q2, probably Q3. So I think it just goes to show he is much stronger than his performance in qualifying. And he had to overtake and then came back and then overtake again. And I don't know. I don't want to call him a phenom just yet, but I think he's one to watch this season.
He's got a ton of potential.
Agreed.
Which of course makes Toto look like a freaking genius.
And see, this is the thing. I thought Toto was crazy. I thought he has lost his marbles, left him on his yacht in Monaco, but I should know better than to doubt Toto. I really should. It's Toto. He's not going to mess anything up, because Susie will just yell at him if he makes a dumb decision, and she won't let him make a dumb decision. So really, we have Susie to thank for this.
Yes. Thank you, Susie. Except they don't inappropriately share information outside of their roles of team principal / CEO and managing director of F1 Academy. Those are two separate rooms, separate situations.
But we can still make the jokes.
Not implying that they are sharing information inappropriately.
No.
Let's talk about the podium real quick, because the podium, Lando won another F1 race, and it looks like he's, starting off right where he left off after Abu Dhabi. I don't necessarily think that this situation is going to last, but he's still coming off of a strong start, and I think that they're taking a lot of the lessons they learned last year, and they really took them to heart over the offseason.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It just didn't excite me that Lando won.
Didn't excite me either.
It made me really sad. What made me more excited was that Oscar got back in the points. Like, that was more exciting, and I was, more entertained by that than Lando. But yeah, I mean, I think it'll be interesting to see how everyone does in the dry. Like, this is really exciting as an opener, but I'm not sold on McLaren yet until they're in the dry and both cars are like equally as competitive. So
I'm not going to be sold until that, and also until other teams start bringing upgrades. But you're right. I'm very curious to see how teams are going to go in the dry, and I really think that the most notable thing, other than this being Lando's 5th F1 race, is that he is the first person not named Max Verstappen to lead the World Drivers' Championship in over 1,000 days.
Yeah, which is wild.
I don't think that this is going to be a situation of somebody taking the lead of the championship and keeping the lead. No. I think the lead might change hands more than once this year.
By multiple people.
Max will take it. Maybe even George will have it for a hot minute.
Please don't even put that out into the universe.
I don't even know, but it'll be very interesting to see. I think that Max did very much outperform the Red Bull, which, considering it was a wet track, that's like, look at Sao Paulo from last year, obviously. Sao Paulo is going to be the new Qatar 2022, where we keep referencing Sao Paulo 2024. Like, we just keep referencing
I can see it. I see it.
But it's going to be really interesting. And Helmut Marko did imply that Red Bull is going to be bringing an upgrade somewhere between race 3, race 4, which is Japan, Bahrain. So it'd be really interesting to see how the Red Bull looks in potentially dry conditions, not driven by Liam Lawson, and we'll get to the rookies in a minute, but also to see how they do with the first rounds of upgrades and how other teams do with the next rounds of upgrades. Yeah, and then George was just there.
Yeah, we don't have to talk about George because who cares? But going back to Red Bull a little bit here, all hatred aside with Checo and Lawson, like, they need to figure out a balance of, like, getting Max the best car for him and winning a Constructors' Championship. Because if you keep favoring Max, who, in my understanding, likes to drive a car like literally no one else on the track. Mm-hmm. So maybe you need to find someone just like him. I doubt you're ever going to do that, but you need to be like, hey, Max, you're going to take like 5 steps back so we can take 100 steps forward and still be 12 steps behind you with this other guy. Because it's clear Liam is super uncomfortable in the car. It was clear Checo couldn't perform. And then look at everyone else before them. Like, they've had the most turnover in that second seat than any other team. You've had Gasly, you've had Albon, you've had Danny, you've had Checo, and you've had Lawson. Yeah. And that's in, like, recent history. That's not even that long, many years.
This is going back maybe, this is literally the Drive to Survive era. So we're talking 7-8 years.
Maybe. Yeah. So it's like, I don't know. I understand what they're doing. I appreciate it. Maybe they're only focused on the Drivers' Championship, but Constructors is also very important. And it seems like they're just setting people up to fail because they are the quickest to snap necks and take that seat away from people. And if Lawson just continues to not be comfortable, he won't be there by the end of the season. I don't think he'll be there by the end of the season. I really don't.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see. And now, not to defend Lawson or anything, but they did make a very interesting gamble on his rear wing. They changed up his rear wing after qualifying, and clearly that rear wing had zero help with pace. It was a bad wing for the weather, whatever. Because I was watching him, like, it took him forever to overtake Esteban Ocon, and then he was 6 seconds behind Gabriel Bortoleto in a stake, And then he was still 6 seconds behind Gabriel Bortoleto in a stake. And then and then finally he got to 4 seconds behind Gabriel Bortoleto in a stake. And then Fernando crashed and there was a safety car and, everything. And then he crashed like right after. So then it ended up not mattering anymore. But I do think that some of Liam's race, he did lose some practice time because he did miss a full practice session. I think it was FP3. It was one of the ones that I not slept through because it was in the evening. I worked through, and so I think that it was one of those data gathering sessions. Like sometimes they would just kind of say whatever to Checo's races last year and be like, "You're going to data gather for us." And I think that was what that was supposed to be ish. And then,
but that doesn't cause you to crash.
No, he crashed because he couldn't handle the weather.
Yeah. So. But all in all, they also need to not treat that second seat as a guinea pig seat. You know what I mean?
That's what the V-carbs are for.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but speaking of V-carb,
yes.
I just want to cover them really quickly because, I know there's not a ton to talk about, but Isack Hadjar, this gem of a child, drove so well all weekend, qualified really well. I was like, wow, he's the rookie I know the least about, and look at him go, doing great. So excited for him. And this poor child spins out DNFs in the formation lap. He's worked his whole life to start a Formula One race. And
he didn't do it.
He has this seat, and he has to wait another week to do it. Oh, this poor sweet child.
Yeah,
poor sweet child. But everything that he showed over the weekend up until that point, I was sold. I was like, wow. Well, because we were I was questioning if he deserved that seat, if he should really be there. I don't know a ton about him, going back and forth, but I'm sold on him. I'm very excited to see what he does this season. I think him and Kimi are going to have the best rookie seasons.
I agree. I, like you going into it, I didn't really know a lot about him other than, what I had looked up so far and knowing that he was the runner-up in F2. And he also had some sort of stall issue at the very beginning of the final race of the year that played into Gabriel Bortoleto's favor ultimately. But it was very interesting to just see him come right out and keeping pace with Yuki, being a little bit ahead of Yuki, who also, Yuki was driving up really high, really well in that little, bit of chaos. And then all of a sudden he was P12. And I was like, how the heck did that happen? Because there were so many other things. So it was not the V-carbs weekend, but I will say that I am still on Team Hadjar. I think that he, this was not a great start for him, but I think that he will be able to move past it, and I think he will do well. And also, I am obsessed with how the V-carb looks on TV.
Oh my God,
it looks
so good. It looks so good. And I mean, both V-carbs qualified really well. So I think it's just the rain. And maybe they didn't have the right setup.
It was all
because
the weather.
Who knows, Parc Ferme conditions, whatever. Maybe it was a bad setup. Like I said, I'm very excited for this season. Australia was great, but I'm very excited to see dry condition race to truly see where everyone shakes out. I think V-carb's going to be so much better than they were last year. I really do.
I fully agree.
I love how Yuki and Isack have been doing all of this Kardashian social media and everything. It kills me, and it's so funny. I'm here for it. They have a great social media team.
Yeah, V-carb is they do things really well. And also, can we talk about the team photo that they did at the very beginning of the weekend,
my God,
where Yuki and Isack are in the back in the back row in the middle? And I know that there's team politics and considerations, and you got to put the top guys up front, but putting the shortest man on track in the back, even if it's in the middle, was one of the funniest things I have ever seen.
And it's behind George, who's the tallest
guy on the grid, one of the tallest.
I know.
Yeah, it was hilarious. And speaking of some of the other really tall drivers on the grid, Nico Hulkenberg in the stake, he took advantage, yo.
I think he got lucky.
Oh, 100%.
This goes back to what I was saying in the beginning of the episode. This was a lot of luck. A lot. P7 fell into his lap and he held on for dear life. I don't think they will see a finish like this again the rest of the season. But Nico is that constant, just
That's
nose
what
of the
Nico
grindstone
Hülkenberg
driver.
does.
That is what he does. He gets the P7, P8, P9, P10. Like, that's where he lives. And he's happy with it. And I think Stake's going to be very happy with a P7 finish. That's probably going to be the highest low finish all season.
It very well might be, unless they come up with like some phenomenal upgrades packages. But
Which they
he
won't.
also scored more points for Stake in one race than they did the
all
entirety
season.
of last year. Which,
Well, they only had one race with points.
yes,
Zhou got like P9, and that was it.
no. He scored points twice. He did, because he finished with 4 points.
Okay.
But and Bottas did not. He did not
get a
manage
single
points,
point.
which was very unfortunate. But no, I do think that Stake shockingly they don't look great. They look better than Haas right now, which I did not expect Haas to be the back of the bus, even with two, brand new drivers and one brand new rookie.
Oh,
but
I did.
The Stake, I honestly thought that the Stake would be as far back, if not worse, than the Haas. So that is really impressive. And even Hulk was talking about, like, I'm going to have to step up because Gabby is so much faster than he looks. And so I think that they're going to have some great team battles. Whether those battles will be for points positions, probably not always, but they could be fighting each other for P10s, especially if they get lucky and, get some good upgrades in.
Yeah, no, I agree. See, this is the thing, though, with when teams are really struggling. Like, I could care less about Aston Martin. I could care less about Alpine. I could care less about Haas. I could care less about Stake. Like, until they do something exciting, I just, don't care.
I mean, Lance Stroll finished solidly in the points, and it's like, and?
Yeah, but
so, it's Lance Stroll. Sorry, Fernando crashed. But it's a very interesting start this season, and I'm very interested to see how things go. And like we've been saying throughout this, basically the entire episode, I'm fascinated to see how they're going to look with everyone in dry conditions. And it'll be tricky next week because next week is a sprint weekend in China. So there's also that, but there is a chance that we won't really get to see what everyone really looks like until Japan in race 3.
No, I think Japan's going to be the telltale of how we're doing, and it's going to be weird if Red Bull's already bringing upgrades to race 3. Good for them. But no, sprint weekends are still another asterisk. It's not a real showing.
It's a weird weekend.
Yes, it is, but it's not, because you don't have the same setup as a normal weekend. So.
But it will also be a challenge for the rookies because you only have one practice session. Yeah. And look at Ollie Behrman with 3 practice sessions.
Yeah,
so
let's talk about the rookies here a little bit. So we predicted carnage and mass chaos, and that is exactly what they did. They delivered, in the wrong way. So we have 6 rookies. Hadjar did not start. Doohan crashed on lap 2 or 3 in his home race, sorry. I'm giving him a little bit more credit than he deserves. Lap 1, he crashed in his home race. And then you have Gabby, he crashed. And then you have Lawson,
who crashed.
And he crashed. And the only one, like we said, the only ones to make it out alive got P4 and P20, which then turned into, P14 because literally everyone crashed. So, not great. I'd say not a great showing. And this is the thing. We all hope and pray that they do well, because they're little babies. But even on every broadcast, it's like, well, it's rain and there's 6 rookies, so you never know what's going to happen. And,
So it's going to be bad. And it was. Yeah, it's, I mean, obviously this, if we have a sliding scale of hard race and really hard race and extremely hard race, for this to be your season opener, your first time, playing with the big boys, and you're in an extremely difficult race where you're on ice skates the entire time with no brakes. Honestly, there were people, including people that I know, who bet that all 5/6 rookies would crash out, and
it's
ultimately
not far off. Honestly,
it isn't, and so it's just it was not their weekend, but also, did we really expect it to be their weekend?
No,
Kimi Antonelli finishing where he did was a stunner.
Yeah, but I wouldn't say that I knew he was going to get points. That's what I'll say.
Mm-hmm.
I understand it's rain conditions and like let's hope that's all it was, but if this is going to be a painful season of like 75 to 80% of the laps being under safety car because rookies keep crashing, I will pull all of my hair out.
Yeah.
Like I understand they're rookies, they're new, but like if this is happening every weekend, like someone pull them from the car. And I know that's harsh, but at the same time it's like it takes away all the entertainment value. It takes away all of the hard work and strategy because then you have 12 safety cars or whatever. So I hope for their sake and for ours that it's not, the rookie slam fest, because that'll just be,
Right.
it'll ruin the season. And this is the season we've been waiting for a year. So
For literally a year.
if you
And I
ruin
also
this for me, Lawson, I will never let you forget.
I mean, you're not going to anyway, but also for context, this is the most rookies Formula One has had since Nico Hulkenberg was a rookie in
And
2010.
he's old.
And he's my age. But actually, I think he's older than me. Hold on, wait a second.
There's only a few of them out there.
I mean, there are not very many drivers. Okay, he's 3 years older than I am.
Yeah.
So
see?
okay, but he is still one of the older drivers on the grid, and he is also the lone survivor of the 2010 rookie class, which also included one of my current not so favorite Sky Sports pundits, who only survived 11 races in his career. But anyway, it is hopefully the rookies will settle in and settle down. But my question is how long before Red Bull pulls a switch and sends Lawson to V-Carb and Yuki to the Red Bull?
It won't be Yuki. It'll be Hadjar.
You think it's going to be Hadjar?
Yep.
I'm all for
does
Hadjar.
Does it make sense? No. But I do not think Helmut will put Yuki in that car. I think, okay, this is going back to an article I was reading today about an interview, how like Honda has literally been holding hostage of that seat.
Yes.
For like years. And Yuki's gotten it. And I think Helmut is pissed and unhappy and doesn't like that they've been holding hostage and they've been forced to keep Yuki. I don't think he likes Yuki. I think he wanted to get rid of Yuki probably after his first season, because we all know season 1 Yuki was not the greatest. But I think it's been amazing that he's been able to hold that seat for 5 seasons and been able to grow. Now he is a very strong driver. He is, marketable and people would take him. But I think I didn't realize how much of a hold Honda had on that one seat. It wasn't just Yuki. Like, it was their seat to keep him there. And I think that just pissed Helmut Marko off. And he just has this bad blood against Yuki and doesn't want to see him succeed and doesn't want him to go far. And I don't think he'll let him in the actual Red Bull. That doesn't make sense. No, but
yeah, I mean, it's a huge question. I do think that Hadjar is at minimum going to keep pace with Yuki this year, barring this little wet weather incident we had in Australia. I do not think that this is a portent of doom for his performance compared to other rookies that we have seen, whether it's Nick DeVries or Liam Lawson or Zhou Guanyu. I really do think that he has a very high ceiling.
I do too.
But I don't think they're going to put him in the Red Bull, which I think means that we might see Lawson for a full year.
And that's the thing. I think they'd rather keep Lawson than put Yuki into Red Bull.
I don't disagree, especially since I'm pretty sure the article that you're talking about also made the point that says in 2026, when Honda leaves Red Bull and goes to Aston Martin, they're not taking Yuki with them.
Yeah, but they can't.
Right.
And so they can't take him because of his contract or whatever. But Yuki will not. Oh, now I'm going to have to stress about where Yuki's going to be.
Now we're going to have to figure out where Yuki's going. So
they said they're not it came across as they're not going to force Aston Martin and Daddy Stroll to fire his son. That's how it came across of if they wanted to,
they should.
And they should, but whatever. Anyways.
Yeah. So that'll be it is going to be very interesting to see who sticks it out with the Red Bull, because it's not like Red Bull's going to call up Danny and say, hey, we screwed up. Do you want to put your Formula One hat back on? Because
No.
I think Danny is like done. I don't think Danny's even going to put his hat in the ring for the Cadillac seat that's opening
No.
up, or that is opened up. And I do think that there's one seat, because I think that one of the other ones will go to either an American or a America's driver who's currently in IndyCar. It's either going to be Pato O'Ward or Alex Palou. So we'll see. But it's the Red Bull second driver situation is going to be very interesting, and Lawson has a lot of work to do, but considering that there really isn't anyone else that Helmut Marko would be willing to put in that seat, possibly, then that might give Lawson time that wouldn't otherwise be afforded to a Red Bull family driver to get his head together.
Yes, I completely agree. Because of who he is and because of who the other options are, Liam will get longer than he should.
Yes. So just like Checo.
Okay. Let's get into our recapping our predictions. I feel like we've talked through everything we needed to for the race. So, okay. Also, over the weekend, Catherine and I made executive game time decision, and we're going to make this a little bit easier on ourselves, so hopefully we get points. But so for our predictions, we predict pole, podium, P10 for a normal race weekend. We also do sprint races, against our will, but we do it, and we score ourselves. We give ourselves 1 point for pole, 5 points for podium, because it's so hard to pick the podium in the correct order, and then we do 3 points for P10. But now we're also going to, give ourselves a softball and give ourselves 3 points if we get the podium but in the wrong order. Because that happened so many times last season where it was like we got P1 and then our P2s and P3s were flip-flopped or whatever. But if we get all three who are on the podium, we'll give ourselves 3 points, which I think is great. Okay, so with that
also,
said,
we're off to a hot start this year, y'all.
We are so good at this. It's actually so much harder than you think it is. I implore all of you to try to do this as well.
And send us your picks for China, and maybe we will read some picks out in next episode.
We're taking, we'll field some from the peanut gallery, if you will. So for pole, Lando took pole. We both put Oscar. He was so close to getting pole.
That qualifying battle was very exciting, and qualifying was also very exciting this weekend, full of intrigue. So can't wait to see more of that.
Yes, and we stuck with our, Oscar making it onto the podium as the very first Australian at the Australian Grand Prix.
We gave him a win too.
We did, and unfortunately it didn't come. So the podium ended up being Lando, Max, George. We both had Lando and Max, but then we both also... No, I didn't even have Max. I put Lewis. Lol. You had Oscar, Max, Lando. I had Oscar, Lando, Lewis.
So if I put George on there, I would have gotten 3 points.
But would you ever put George on there? Probably not.
I would put George on there before you would.
Yes, but you wouldn't have done that the first race of the season.
Oh God,
there's no way.
I did not see Mercedes like I predicted Mercedes double points, but in P6, P7, because I honestly thought Ferrari was going to do a lot better than the way they performed.
All did.
Push the K1 button, Lewis. No.
Oh my god.
That poor guy.
Speaking of Lewis, he ended up in P10, and you had Carlos and I had Alex, and we were both wildly wrong. Which is totally fine. I'm so glad that Alex got more points than P10, and I'm so sorry, Alex, that I underestimated you.
I am thrilled to be wrong. Ooh, I have ESPN on in the background, and they're showing the F1 movie trailer, the new one.
Oh my gosh, with 0.5% of plot and 5 words.
0.5% of plot and a lot more imagery of races that they filmed at, including the likes of Abu Dhabi, angry people, fences, a car on fire. Speaking of the trailer, really quick, I know we've talked about so many things, but I do think that they are taking a page from Roman Grosjean's crash in 2020 as one of the plot points in the movie, just based on one of the fiery car crashes. I'm pretty sure that they're taking a page out of that book, and I'm very interested to see what this movie is going to be like, even though it is going to be lots of action and the thinnest of thin plots, and Brad Pitt making out with what's-her-face, Carrie Condon, her character, because of course.
Of course. Okay, so getting back to predictions. Back on track here. And then just for funsies, we picked the biggest surprise of the weekend and then who did a dumb or an oops for the weekend. So, Catherine, you said that Mercedes was going to get double points, which they did, like you said. Much higher, agreed, than I would have thought. I also kind of just wish that his first race, Kimi would have beaten George. That would have just like made
that would have
my
been
heart so
also
happy.
fun.
If he didn't spin out and if he would have started a little bit higher, I 100% think that he would have beaten George.
Yeah. Also, I was pushing, and I don't normally push for this, but I kind of wanted George to crash when Alex was driving in P4.
Oh,
Because I was like,
too.
I wanted Alex to get a podium.
God, I did too.
Like, that would have been amazing.
Oh, I know. I've never wanted him to crash more than that moment. Actually,
I was like, can you just like pull a Singapore? Like, just pull a Singapore 2023 real quick. Just do, please. And then he didn't.
Yeah, unfortunately. Also, unfortunately, I had Williams got into double points, which they did not because Carlos DNF'd, which was really
But
depressing.
that is a more likely prediction this year than it was last year.
Agreed. And I feel like it's not going to, I can't use it as a surprise anymore because it's just going to happen every weekend.
Yeah. So we'll see.
Okay, and then who's going to do a dumb? So you said Aston Martin. They were very anonymous. I mean, Lance got P6. Fernando did end up crashing towards the end of the race, but I don't know. I wouldn't say it was necessarily because of a dumb. Like, the weather, it's hard. Like, that wasn't a dumb crash, you know what I mean?
No, that was the weather bit Fernando, like it bit half the grid, and he just couldn't he couldn't save it, which is what happened with a bunch of other people. But you nailed your dumb.
I did. I said not only is Lawson going to do terribly, but I said he's going to DNF, and he did.
Yeah.
I mean, it's sad to see. It really is, especially just knowing, like, the scrutiny that all these rookies are under. We never want to see them suffer. I just don't want to see them, like, do well. And them meaning Lawson. So
I just as the Red Bull fan, I would like to see Lawson not do this again, just because Red Bull needs a second driver who can keep up with Max.
Max is going to end up carrying this team, dragging Lawson to the podium.
To P3. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Overall, super excited for the season. Glad 2025 is finally here. We've only been waiting for this for a year.
Literally.
And I love Australia. There's always mass chaos. It's so delivered. But now I'm really excited for Japan.
So I agree. I'm really excited. China will be very interesting. China will be an opportunity for a big points haul for a lot of teams. I know McLaren's going to be real eager to get some 1-2s in there just so that they can get themselves a solid cushion, especially as teams start bringing upgrades, because yes, Red Bull's bringing early upgrades, but they're not going to be the only ones. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see how these early races go. Obviously, we have a lot of questions. Lawson's a question. Poor Jack Doohan is a question, and Flavio Briatore has probably already got Franco Colapinto like fitted for his seat,
or his other 27 reserve drivers,
or any of the other ones.
Stable,
so many of them. But it's going to be a very interesting season, and I am like, this was one of the best starts to a season we could have asked for, even if it was incredibly stressful and an incredibly late night, and I'm still very tired.
I agree.
Yeah. Now, to something very important to the both of us, your off-track moment of the weekend.
Yes. So if you're new to the podcast, every weekend I pick an off-track moment that's cute, fun, haha, love, something we want to point out. And this off-track moment is, I don't even know how to put it into words. I was in actual tears. It was so heartfelt, so genuine, so something I never would have expected, and something, very genuine, and he sought him out. So Anthony Hamilton, if you don't know who he is, he's Lewis Hamilton's dad, and if you don't know, you have to live under a rock, but Isack Hadjar has looked up to Lewis Hamilton since he's been a kid. He's his favorite driver. He gets nervous every single time he's around him, which is, it's not funny, like, but it's so sweet.
It's amazing.
And it's very enduring, and endearing that he holds him in such a high regard. He was visibly upset, and I think some of it may have been embarrassment as well, but I think he was visibly upset and disappointed in himself for not being able to, start his first race. Anthony Hamilton left Ferrari's pit, wherever he was, found Isack to have a conversation with him and tell him, like, you are so good. You have so much promise. Don't let this define you. You have such a long road ahead. You have a great road ahead. I have chills just talking about this.
I know. This was one of the greatest things I've ever seen.
And it just kind of really had the impact on me of, there's a lot going on in the world and sports are super competitive, but like we're good people deep down. And like there's more to this life than just like making the podium. And seeing just that moment between the two of them and like them embracing a big hug, I thought was so cool. I know for a fact Lewis had to have reached out to him after. Lewis is like semi-aware now of his like fandom of Isack Hadjar.
Yeah, because Gabriel Bortoletto told him.
I know, which I'm like, Gabby, come on, keep your mouth shut.
He's such a little troll. I love it.
It is great. Yeah,
but
there's some levity there.
That was one of the great moments of sportsmanship in all sports in general, and like,
special.
Not to be a bummer about it, but Helmut Marko said some dumb things about it afterwards, and Helmut Marko was just going off all weekend on the rookies, whether he was giving them grades that were somewhat demeaning and unwarranted, or just saying that like that was like, I'm not going to put into words what he said about what, Isack Hadjar getting emotional afterwards, but it was unnecessary, and Helmut Marko needs to stop talking for a while.
Here's the thing.
He needs
like
to go on another
years
TV
old
timeout.
And he's crumbling, and I get that maybe he's like the greatest thing to ever happen to Red Bull, which we can all argue it's someone else, but like take a beat, man. This is a really big moment for him. He's worked his entire life for this, and to have something happen so just out of the blue, unexpected. No one expects to crash on the formation lap. Yeah, I feel so bad for him, and my heart goes out to him. And I think it was such a class act by Lewis's dad, and
especially to go like leave the garage and go looking
he
for
like
him.
Actively looked out for him. Like he said, I had to find him. I had to tell him this because he's such a great kid. And he put so much pressure on himself. He has so much promise. Like I just needed to remind him in that moment that everything's going to be okay. And I was just like, that's so cool. And Isack will remember that forever. And I think, I mean, as rookies, you kind of got to help them along a little bit. And it's unfortunate that it had to be, Lewis's dad doing that instead of someone on his team.
Like Helmut.
Right. But I mean, and Helmut's like not even part of V-Carb. Like he's Red Bull. I mean, I know.
Well, yeah, but he's also
sister teams, whatever. But
he's the one who's in charge of putting the drivers where they go. So
yeah, I know, but I'm getting tired of his antics.
Yeah, Helmut needs to take a little bit of a media timeout, kind of like what he did when he made those racist comments about Checo a couple of years ago. Oops, because he's old. But I agree. That was a great off-track moment. Anyway. We've talked for an hour, so let's wrap this up.
So coming up next, we have China. So China is a sprint weekend. Unfortunately, those predictions will be out on Thursday. This has been our Australia Grand Prix recap. Thanks for going off track with us, guys.